intelligencesquared.com.
Our next speaker in favor of the motion is a leading American neoconservative and a resident fellow at the American Enterprise Institute. It's his contention that diplomacy is unlikely to persuade Iran to give up what he says is its intention to make a nuclear weapon. Given the Islamic Republic's dark history, he says, we may have to fight a war, perhaps sooner rather than later, to stop evil men obtaining the worst weapons we know. Ladies and gentlemen, Reuel Marc Gerecht.
I just want to say first thank you for the invitation here. I also want to say it's just a bit odd when I actually hear the word neoconservative. I've spent most of the last 7.5 years in French-speaking environments, and there I've become adjusted to and quite affectionate, I must confess, about being described as a néocon. I also have to add, it is a little dangerous to allow me to drink wine on the podium. I'm not as bad as Christopher Hitchens, but I can perhaps give him a run for his money. Now let's just quickly go over through things. I mean, down memory lane, I actually had a former life. I've cast it aside, and I'm quite happy I have, when I used to work in the Central Intelligence Agency. And because of that, I would suggest to all of you, you have great skepticism about the NIE on Iran. But I do remember that when I was living in France at that time, and I was dealing with a variety of French friends, particularly down at CNRS, which I think has probably the finest collection of French Iranian scholars in the world. And they were telling me how things were changing. Rafsanjani was bringing about a new order. He wanted new trade, bring trade with France, et cetera, et cetera. And I remember I was sitting in my office, and I can mention this because it was published in a French newspaper. I was sitting in my office one day, and I was reading through the Intercept Cron. And as I was reading through the Intercept Cron, one came in, and it was of the Iranian Intelligence Ministry, and it was to the chief of station in Paris, and it said, please go inform the ambassador that he is dead. Now, I said, uh-oh. And sure enough, just a few days later, Shapul Bakhtiar was found with his throat slit and stabbed to death in a variety of other ways. Now, that was the beginning of a killing trend throughout Europe where Rafsanjani, and I emphasize Rafsanjani and Khamenei, I'm not going to talk about Ahmadinejad, I can mention a little bit about him, and that unlike Khatami, who was very powerful on the first day he got elected, Ahmadinejad has actually become more powerful each and every day. But he's not the player here. I'll exclude him from the conversation. Let's talk about Rafsanjani, who's the great white turbaned hope, and let's talk about Khamenei. All right? From the beginning of the 1990s until about 1997, there was a killing spree throughout Europe. Rafsanjani, who trained individuals, I should say his intelligence minister, Falahian, had sent people across Europe to kill Iranian expatriates and worldwide, globally, to kill Jews. Now, this is the man who, at the very same time, was also trying to solicit trade. Let us not forget that in the Khobar bombings in 1996, which were unquestionably authorized by Rafsanjani and Khamenei, that killed 19 Americans and wounded another 250 individuals, that 3 weeks before that, they made an application to the World Trade Organization. Now, let's also talk about Khamenei and Rafsanjani. In 1998, after Al-Qaeda bombs the American embassies in Africa, they allow, according to the 9/11 Commission, you can go look at it, the Iranians allow Al-Qaeda to have laissez-passer through Iran. Now, why in God's name are they doing that? I mean, Al-Qaeda by this time is clearly a killing machine. Now, supposedly, some people believe out there that Sunni extremists and Shiite extremists, in fact, are incompatible. I disagree with you. One thing about Rafsanjani and Khamenei is, in fact, the aspiration to be much more ecumenical about things. They have not always been rewarded. It's sometimes been an unrequited love affair. In fact, one of the differences with Al-Qaeda is they are actually a little bit less Shiite than they have been until the incident into Iraq. I mean, Khamenei, for example, let's go back again. And Khamenei, what did the gentleman do? He loves to read novels. I actually have a great deal of respect for him. He's a man of principle and integrity, and unlike many mullahs, you don't have to think too much about the issue of corruption. He is more or less an honest man. He's also a very wealthy man since he has the endowment in Mashhad, which is just billions and billions of dollars, so he doesn't have to worry about being corrupt. But Khamenei, I mean, he loves novels. He gave an award to Salman Rushdie's Midnight Children, which, by the way, if you haven't read it, is a great novel. I particularly like the description of Benazir Bhutto as Miss Iron Pants. That if you go back and he gave an award to that. Now, this is the same individual who later, of course, is authorizing all these terrorist actions. I mean, why, personally, why do I love Iran? I love Iran because it's a deeply conflicted society. It's very complicated. I mean, the Iranians themselves use the image of an onion. You constantly have to, peel it. There are different layers to it. I mean, that's why Iran is a fascinating place, because, in fact, what you get in the elections, what you get as popular opinion, has very little to do whether, in fact, you have a terrorist team that's going out to try and kill people. It has very little to do whether the Iranians are sending out explosive devices which have killed intentionally American and British soldiers. It has very little to do with their support for Hekmatyar in Afghanistan. The issue is not whether the Islamic Republic of Iran, the clerical regime, is a militaristic country. No, it's not. It's a terrorist country. It's got terrorism in its DNA. It's worked. Now, we could hope, I mean, each and every time, I have to say, I mean, I've spent time with people that I deeply admire, scholars who I think the world of. And each and every time from about since the death of Khomeini, they kept saying, we're going to have Thermidor. Thermidor is coming. Now, the Iranian people have unquestionably had Thermidor. They're way beyond Thermidor. But the clerical elite is not. In fact, the reverse has happened. They're, in fact, reinvigorating an Islamist understanding of the world where the Islamic Republic really is the sword and shield of Islam. It is not an accident when Khamenei in his 4th of January speech refers to the United States as Satan incarnate. That's actually, I think, better than Shaitani Buzurg, the great Satan. He means it. We constantly are reinterpreting what they say very obviously and say, oh, that's not what they really mean. Well, no. These individuals, particularly the clerics are jurisprudence. Now, I am the first one to say one of the reasons I love Iranian clerics is they twist and turn. There are gradations. There's not black and white. It's all over the place. And that any individuals who spend most of their lives doing reading, speaking, and sex have to be interesting. But they are also individuals who can be animated by a fervor which is deeply, deeply connected to their basic identity and their relationship with God. And what we constantly do is resecularize them. We say they don't really believe the same things they do. Well, yes, they do. They really do believe the things they do. There are elements of the Revolutionary Guard Corps who don't. But the elements of the Revolutionary Guard Corps who set up a terrorist apparatus in Europe, the Revolutionary Guard Corps that sets up a terrorist apparatus in Iraq, the Revolutionary Guard Corps that was involved with the bombing in Khobar, the Revolutionary Guard Corps, without a shadow of a doubt, it's either the Guard Corps or the Ministry of Intelligence, it's not perfectly clear, that was involved with allowing al-Qaeda to move through Iran in 1998. These people believe. And I come back to that. If in fact, you're going to argue that you can have these negotiations with them, and by the way, I'm all in favor of that. I was married in the Iranian embassy in Washington, D.C. I would have preferred to be married in Tehran. They wouldn't let me in, at least not legally. But the problem is that these individuals do not want to negotiate. The Bush administration, if it were bright, would say, let's negotiate about absolutely everything. No conditions. Because one of these things that's going to make you realize is the realist illusion that, in fact, there is some grand bargain out there is a myth. So let's go down that path, and after we go down that path, we will discover you have only one option. You let this regime that uses terrorism as a basic tool, a basic part of its identity, have a nuclear weapon, or you bomb them. I'll stop there.